so I've been gone for a week out to the East Coast, and I just got back the other day. I harvested everything that grew while I was gone, and now it is time to start preserving everything. Obviously you can see I've got far too many zucchini here, so this is gonna take up probably the bulk of my time. I've got a bunch of dry herbs that I have to do something with, some tomatoes, there's another crate on the floor over there. And I've also got 8 frames of honey that I have to do something with, so I got a lot of stuff to do. It's the evening right now, so I'm just gonna start with the honey for tonight. I'm gonna separate that, I'm gonna let it strain overnight, and then tomorrow I'm gonna get going on all this. But let's get started on the honey. Alrighty, I've got 8 full frames of honey here, and they are literally full, which is great. Because my bees are new this season, I lost my hives over the winter last winter, and I had to get 2 new nukes this year, so I'm not pulling a whole bunch out. I pulled 8 frames out of the 2 hives combined, so the majority of the honey is still in the hives for the bees. I definitely don't want to take too much out. I want to make sure they have enough food stored for the winter. So there's definitely still lots of time for them to bring in food. I always feed my bees at the end of the season as well, so I'm not worried that they're not going to have enough food for the winter. Now, there's multiple ways that you can do this when you're processing your honey. Number 1, you can use an extractor, which is the big drum. You put it in that, you spin it, and it kind of shoots the honey out, and then it drains to the bottom, and you empty it through the bottom through like a valve. What I like to do is the crush and strain method, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. So I take the whole frame, I crush all the wax and the honey together, I strain it out, I jar the honey, and then I keep the wax and I render it to make soap and lip balm and other stuff like that for the website. Now what you don't want to do is you don't want to take every single frame out of your hive and then use the crush and strain method on all of them. If you do that, you're going to be putting your frames back into the hive completely bare, and none of them will have drawn out comb on them. And what that means is all your bees have to draw the comb out again before they can start putting honey in them. So here's how I do it. I grab a big pot, I grab a strainer, like a mesh strainer, put it over the top. You do not have to use cheesecloth in this. I like to because I don't like the wax getting stuck to the mesh on here. So I always use a cheesecloth. It just kind of keeps all the wax nice and tight together. And then I can just take the whole ball that's left over and put it in the freezer. So I like to double it up just so it's a little bit more sturdy when I pick it up after. And then you want to push it down into your strainer. And then we're going to take our frame, and you can see it's all capped honey on there. I'm going to set it on top of here, and I'm going to use a spatula, and I'm just going to scrape it right off. That noise you can hear outside is the kids. They've got a friend over and they're just riding a 4-wheeler around outside right now. And there they go by the window. All right. And just flip it over and do the other side. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put it back in the pot, and I'm going to continue to let it drip into the bottom of the pot. And then once I'm done with everything, I'll dump the pot into the cheesecloth and strain out the last bit that's in the bottom. So I just kind of take my spatula and break up the wax. Gravity is going to do its own thing here, and it doesn't actually take that long to separate the honey out. It's already coming out really quickly in the bottom right now. All right, so I've got 2 frames in here, back in front of 2 full frames, and I'm overflowing. So I'm just gonna kind of tie this up a bit. Well, not really tie it, just kind of fold it in, twist it like that, and I'm just gonna let it drain overnight. You can see how quickly it's coming out already. It smells so friggin' good. It smells amazing. So I'm gonna let that sit overnight. I'll probably just throw the lid on top. And then I'll just let that sit until tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow morning, I will separate the wax, and then I'll do 2 more frames on top of this. And I'm just gonna use 1 more pot to get the rest of them done. And then I'll just do the same thing. So I'll just scrape 2 more frames into here. That'll be 4 frames total. I'll let it sit until tomorrow morning, and then I'll do the other 4 frames and it'll be done. All right, it's the next day now, and the 2 pots I had going this morning, I actually combined into this 1 pot because I needed the other pot to make soap this morning. So I got both of them here, and I did end up picking up another strainer as well. So, all right, so you can see the honey is completely dripped out of this, and the wax is all that's left. You can see here in the cheesecloth, that's all wax in there. So I'll render this down another day, definitely not today because I don't have time to do that right now. So usually what I do is I collect all the wax from the season, I put it in the freezer, and then usually one day in the winter when I do bone broth or render down fat, I'll also render down this and just kind of do it all at once. I am gonna leave it in this piece of cheesecloth to put it in the fridge because when I render it down, I put this whole package in the hot water. That way all the stuff that's in there, like if there's dead bees or anything off the wax that I don't want, it's gonna get stuck in the cheesecloth and it won't melt into the wax. So I just find it's easier to do it this way. It saves a step. There's definitely a little bit of wax in here still, which is fine. Some people do like to leave little bits of wax in their honey. You can essentially chew on it like gum. I personally don't like that. Whoops. So I will strain this out again. There's the second bundle of wax. Same thing, I'll just leave that tied up. And now I'm gonna set up the 2 strainers again with more cheesecloth and do the last 4 frames. I do like to leave a little bit extra around the edge. Well, not a little bit, like kind of a significant amount, just so that I can wrap it up and tie it when I'm done. All right, honey's all done. I put the frames back in the hives and the bees can clean up all the remnants that are left on that, and then they'll draw some more comb and fill up the frames again. While I was in there, I noticed that where I had pulled the frames out, normally when I remove a frame, I'll put an empty one in, but I actually didn't have any empty frames to put in. So the 2 days that those frames have been sitting in the house, the bees started making wax to fill in the gaps of where the frames were. And I brought a couple pieces in to show you. So this was hanging off the lid between the frames. There's a couple pieces in there. And they were basically making their own frames to put honey in. So this wax is still good. There's no honey in these yet. They just started making them. And I'll just put this in with the wax and render it down when I do the rest of it. It's amazing to me that they make such perfect little combs. Like, they're all perfect. They're all uniform. It's crazy. All right, next up is the herbs. So this bowl is, I think it's mostly basil. Is that what I cut? Yeah, I think the whole bowl is actually basil. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tie them into bundles and then I'm just gonna let them air dry. There's multiple ways you can dry your herbs. So I do have a dehydrator. I just find the dehydrator because it can't fit all of this at one time. And each batch takes a few hours to get it as dry as it needs to be. So I'm just gonna tie them into a bundle and then I'll just hang them up probably off my racks in the kitchen. Another way to do it is if you don't wanna use the dehydrator and you don't wanna tie them up, you can definitely use your oven. It is way too hot here for me to be using my oven. We were in the middle of a heat wave the last few days and it just ended today, but it's still 35 degrees out right now. So the thought of turning the oven on right now is just, it's not an option. So I'm just gonna tie them into little bundles like this, and it's kind of the same as when I tie my garlic. You wanna make sure that you tie them pretty tight because once they start to dry out, it'll make some space in between the herbs and the string. So just make sure you tie it nice and tight. And then that's it. You just hang it up. They smell really good. If you've never dried your own herbs before, I can tell you, once they're dry and you're cooking with them midwinter, they still smell way more fresh than anything you can buy from the store, even when they're dehydrated. Another thing you can do with this, or any other herb that you're harvesting, is you can take the leaves off and then you can mix them in olive oil and freeze them in little ice cube trays. So basically the same thing I do with the garlic scapes in the olive oil, you can do it with the herbs in olive oil, and then just use those for cooking in the winter. All right, the very last bundle actually turned out to be rosemary. I forgot that I picked some of that. Rosemary is one of my favorite herbs. I love the smell of it. It smells so good. Dry and fresh, it smells good. All right, that's it. Last one. All right, it's time to get started on the zucchini, and this is going to take forever. I have pounds upon pounds upon pounds of zucchini, so I really just need to get started. What I'm going to do is take the ends off of these, and then I'm just gonna put them through the food processor and shred them. Once everything's shredded, I'll vacuum seal them in bags, and then I'll put them in the freezer, and I'll do something with them at some point over the winter. Well, probably before the winter, because I do need to make zucchini relish to stock the website. So I will definitely be using them for that. But for now, I just need to get through shredding all these. I should mention too that when I am shredding my zucchini, I take the seeds out. I don't like to have the seeds in my shredded zucchini, especially when they're this big, because the seeds are kind of big. It just doesn't taste good and it changes the texture. So I always just use a spoon and scrape the inside out. So that's perfect. That's exactly the consistency I'm looking for. I always leave the skins on, and look how much faster this goes by using the food processor than shredding it by hand. So I've had a bit of an issue. I completely ruined the blade for my food processor. It obviously couldn't handle the size of the zucchini I was putting in there. However, my replacement blade just showed up, and it's time to get going again on finishing up the zucchini. All right, so it's been a few days since I've been doing zucchini, and my replacement blade just showed up, so I'm gonna get back into finishing the rest of the zucchini. Also, my honey is done, so I did my second strain on it, and it looks absolutely perfect in this pot. I got just over 11 liters off those 7 frames. For some reason I thought there was 8 frames, but I think there was only 7. So I've got 11 liters of honey here. I'm gonna jar that up. Before I start jarring up my honey though, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna blanch my tomatoes, put them in a pot, and start letting them boil down. That's gonna be a process on its own. It's gonna take some time. So while the tomatoes are boiling down, that's when I'll start jarring up my honey and then finishing up the zucchini. So first things first, I need to get some hot water in a pot and get ready to start doing my tomatoes. All right, so there's lots of ways you can go about doing your tomatoes. So for me, what I do is I take all of my tomatoes and I turn them into crushed tomatoes, and I just jar plain, straight plain crushed tomatoes. That's it. I don't use these and make pasta sauce and then jar that separately. I find it's easier for me if I just do crushed tomatoes. That way, as I need them for things, if I'm using them for meat sauce or if I'm using the crushed tomatoes as a base for curry or something, I can season the tomatoes the way that I want them for that specific recipe. I find what I've done in the past is made too much pasta sauce and not enough crushed tomatoes, and then when I go to use it later on, I don't have the thing that I'm looking for, and I have too much of one and not enough of the others. So for me, it just makes sense to do everything crushed tomatoes and just season it the way I want it as I'm using it. So there's tons of ways you can do this. You can use a food mill, basically like a meat grinder with an attachment, and you put your tomatoes through that and it separates the skin and the seeds and everything else. You can also put them in the freezer just the way that they are, and then when you pull them out of the freezer and they start to thaw, the skin will separate. You can just peel it right off. I don't like to have the skin in my crushed tomatoes because I don't like the texture of it, so I always take it off. So what I do is cut the top off because we don't want that. You can put a little X in the bottom, just lightly breaking the skin. We're not cutting into it. And then we're gonna put these in hot water, right out of the hot water into the cold water, and the skin will peel right off. There is a little tool you can get that just kind of scrapes just the top part off. I don't have one, I just use this little paring knife, which is totally fine. So you can use whatever works for you. I find the paring knife works just fine. I'm just gonna go ahead and whip through this case of tomatoes, and then we will move on to the next step. You wanna blanch them in hot water for about 30 seconds, so 30 to 45 seconds. So I'm just gonna let those sit in there for 30 to 45 seconds, and then I'll pull them out and put them right into the cold water. So all I've done is I've filled up my sink. It's got cold water in it, and I'll just take the tomatoes right from here and put them right in the sink. As you can see, the skin is already starting to come off the tomatoes just on its own. So peeling them is going to be pretty easy. All right, so my tomatoes are in the sink and they're just cooling down. So while they're cooling down, I'm going to go ahead and put this honey in the jars. Look at the color of that. Oh, it smells so good. So I don't normally store my honey in 1 liter jars, but one of my family members purchased 6 liters of it. So instead of putting it in a whole bunch of little jars, I'm just gonna put it in 6 big ones. All right, so I've got my honey put in jars and put away. All my tomatoes are blanched. It's time to start peeling them. And as you can see, the skin is just coming right off. So this shouldn't take too long to peel. All right, so I've got all my tomatoes in this pot and I'm ready to boil them down. I did have the lid on just to get the pot hot so they could boil faster, but now You can actually hear it boiling in the bottom, and that's why I'm taking the lid off. What I want to do is evaporate some of the liquid out because I want my tomatoes to boil down into a thick consistency like crushed tomatoes. So the way to do that is a long time over the heat and letting the water evaporate out. So I'm gonna leave this for a few hours and I'm gonna start moving on to finishing up the rest of the zucchini. All right, so we started shredding the zucchini again with the new blade, and now the actual food processor itself has stopped working. So I need to get a new food processor tomorrow. I don't know what is going on with this one. I understand why the blade broke, but I don't understand why it's not working at all anymore. So I put that on pause. I've chopped some of it up so it's ready to go into the food processor tomorrow when I pick up a new one. My tomatoes have already boiled down about 4 inches in the pot. And I forgot to mention that I actually was gifted this rhubarb the other day from one of you guys. So all I plan on doing with this right now is just cutting the top off and trimming the end, and then I'll just cut it into chunks and put it in the freezer. I'll use this later on in the fall to make a strawberry rhubarb crisp, so I'll probably save it for that. For now, I'm just gonna cut this up and put it in the freezer. Okay, so I just finished blending up my tomatoes. Normally I would put them in the blender and do it, but I found when I do that and they're hot, the blender tends to build up some pressure and explode. So that's definitely happened before. So what I do now is I use an immersion blender in there and I just kind of immersion blend it. I suppose I didn't need to make that noise. I could have just showed you when I was actually doing it, but anyways, it got away from me and I realized I didn't actually show immersion blending it. So I just put the hand immersion blender in there, blend it up a bit until it gets to the consistency I like, which is no chunks. So now it's ready to be put in jars and pressure canned. Because I'm not adding any acid to this, it's gonna go in the pressure canner. If you're gonna water bath it, you wanna add some acid, some lemon juice or something like that. For me, I'm just gonna pop it in the pressure canner, so I'm not gonna be adding any acid to it. So I'm gonna jar that up and get it in the pressure canner, and this will be the first round of tomatoes going on the shelf. All right, so I'm all set up here and I've got my jars out. I'm actually using jars from the vintage and antique collection I was gifted not too long ago. So they've been sitting empty in a cellar of an old farm for decades, and I feel very privileged to be able to fill these back up again and give them life because they've just been sitting empty for decades upon decades. So this is really cool to actually be able to fill them up and give them some life again, put them back on the shelf. So I chose all the square jars, all the jars that I really like, and I'm just gonna go ahead and fill these up. I'm gonna be pressure canning these at 11 PSI for about 25 minutes for the 1 liter jars. I always do mine in 1 liter jars. I find 500 mils isn't enough sauce for me to make for all of us for dinner at one time, but 1 liter is sometimes too much. You want to leave about a 1/2 inch of headspace. We're not going to be filling these right up to the top, but also don't underfill them because we don't want the jars to siphon out and empty out into the pot while they're pressure canning. Another thing to note too when you're canning stuff is you always want to use brand new seals. We're not reusing seals. You can definitely reuse a band, but you can't reuse a seal because once you pop the top on it to open the jar after it's been processed, you've essentially warped the seal and it will never seal the same again. All right, so I've got 8 liters of crushed tomatoes. I'm gonna wipe these rims, I'm gonna put new seals on them, and we're gonna pressure can them for 25 minutes. Another thing you wanna keep in mind too is when you're putting your bands on, we're not gonna be cranking them on as tight as we can get them. We're just doing them hand tight. And also you wanna make sure that the seals in the jars that you're using are sterile. So you can throw them through your dishwasher or you can boil them in hot water. Another thing to keep in mind too is you wanna make sure that the food that you're processing is the same temperature as the water you're putting it in. So this is hot and the water that's in my pot is already hot. We're not adding cold tomatoes to hot water. That'll shatter the jar. We're not adding hot tomatoes to cold water because that will shatter the jar. Hot tomatoes in a jar and the water that's in my pot is already hot as well. All right, so I've got my tomatoes in the pot. The lid is on. So what you're gonna do now is there's a little steam stack right here. And what you wanna do is you wanna wait to have a good steady stream of steam coming out of this vent for 2 minutes. So as long as the steam is consistently coming out for 2 minutes, then you can put your weighted gauge on top of that. I use one of these which has different rings on it, and this helps control the pressure in the pot significantly easier in my opinion. So when you put this on by itself, this is 5 pounds. When you put one ring on, that's 10 pounds. And when you put the second ring on, that's 15 pounds. So it works relatively well at keeping the pressure where it's supposed to be based on the amount of weight that's on this gauge. The one that it comes with doesn't have these rings. It's just a black plastic weight that sits on top. It definitely does the same thing, but it's a lot harder to control the pressure and keep it at a stable pressure while you're pressure canning. This was something I bought after I had the pot. I can put it in the link below. I think it's on my Amazon store. And I just find it very helpful for maintaining the pressure in the pot. So I'm just gonna wait for this to build up the right amount of steam. I'll put this on. Once the weight goes on, then you wait for it to get up to the correct amount of pressure on the gauge, and that's when you start your timer. All right, it is now the next day. Actually, I think it's been 2 days since I was on here last, but it's time to do the final thing, which is the banana peppers. So I'm gonna cut all these banana peppers up, then I'll pickle them. Pickling these is basically the only way that we eat them. We eat tons of pickled peppers throughout the year, so I just usually take all of them and make a brine and just pickle everything. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I don't have a lot. As I mentioned before, this summer has been horrible as far as weather goes, so I'm lucky to even have this. I just went down to the garden because it has rained for the last day and a half. Not all day, but it's definitely been on and off raining for the last day and a half, so the garden is getting a good drink of water. So I went down there the other day and I noticed that my banana peppers are producing a second round, which is great. So hopefully I get enough off of the second harvest to keep me going through the winter with pickled peppers. So here's hoping. All I'm gonna do with these is cut the tops off. I'm gonna cut them into rings, and then I've got a brine that I like to make. I'll pack them into jars and then I'll water bath them. Because this brine is a vinegar base, so we don't need to pressure can them, just water bathing is good. So let's get started. While I was finishing up some of the other stuff, Abby went ahead and juiced a bunch of lemons, which yes, it's not something that we grew, but they were on sale. So she just juiced them and we ended up canning a bunch of lemon juice. All right, I finished cutting up my hot peppers. I don't have very many, but I mean, I'm glad I even have some. So I've got 2 jars here. I might need 3, I'm not really sure, but we'll find out. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my peppers and put them in my jars. So these are clean, dry, and sterile. And when you pack peppers or pickles or pretty much anything that you're canning in a brine, you wanna make sure that you push them down and pack them in as much as you can, because what's gonna happen if it's not packed down and nice and tight in there, once you pour the brine in and then put it in the water bather, they'll all start floating, and you don't want that. You want everything tucked into the jar, super nice and tight. So just pack them down as much as you can. And honestly, I should probably be wearing gloves right now because my fingers are gonna be burning later. I always think I have them packed in tight enough. For some reason, no matter how tight I pack them, there always ends up being space once the brine is in. All right, so I've got 3 jars here, which is not very much. Last year, I think I had 10 liters. That's how different the weather and the growing season has been this year, that this is all I have right now. I should get another 1.5 liters, so I mean, I should have around 3 liters when I'm done, but that's not even anywhere close to what I had last year. Thankfully, because I had such a good season last year, I still have, I think, 4 liters left. So the 4 liters I have left, plus the second round I should get out of the garden, that'll be enough to keep us until next year. So, I mean, it's gonna have to do. But these look really nice. I like the different colors in the jar. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make our brine for these. Now, if you want, you can put a clove of garlic in these. I never do, but you can if you want. I just do straight peppers and the brine. So all you do for the brine is equal parts water and equal parts vinegar. So for every 5 cups of water, you do 5 cups of vinegar and half a cup of pickling salt. I'm obviously not doing that much because I only have 3 jars to fill. So I'll adjust the ratio, but basically that's what you do. 5 cups of water, 5 cups of vinegar, half a cup of pickling salt. Bring it to a boil in your pot, and then you're just gonna fill the jars, and then we're gonna water bath them. All right, so all we're gonna do now is we're gonna water bath these for 10 minutes and that's it, then they're done. And this is the last thing I have to can this week. Obviously there's still lots more stuff to harvest. I still have to do the rest of my herbs at the end of the season, the second round of peppers, I have to pull my carrots, and my potatoes aren't ready yet. I mean, I don't know what the potatoes are gonna look like just given how the weather's been this year, but hopefully there's still some in the ground. Otherwise, I am done for the first round of canning. That's it. That was the last 3 jars. Finally, as much as I love growing food and canning food and stocking my pantry for the winter, by the end of canning season, I am spent. So I still have a little bit left to go, but the bulk of things are done now. I did end up with 25 liters of tomatoes, which is amazing. I usually only get about 19 or 20, and then every single time I run out. So the garden still has quite a few tomatoes in it, so I'll probably be able to get a couple more liters, which is great. Hoping for more peppers as well. I also just added some lemon juice to the shelf. I think I have about 80 pounds of zucchini, which I know sounds ridiculous, but zucchini relish will be well stocked this season on the website. My first round of herbs are done, and I've got tons more of those to go. But otherwise, that is it for the first round of canning. So that wraps up this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram @_livingdifferent, where you can stay up to date on what I'm doing all the time. I post on there multiple times a day, and Instagram always has different content than YouTube. Don't forget to check out the website, www.living-different.com, where you can have a browse through all the products I have to offer on there. When you first log into the website, a little box will pop up and it'll ask you if you want to sign up for a weekly newsletter. The newsletter comes out every Sunday at 9. If you don't want to sign up for the newsletter, that's totally fine. Just hit the X and it'll take you right back to the website so you can browse as normal. That's it for this video though. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.